Take Dark Souls level design and progression, add in Diablo-style loot system, beef up the combat, and crank the difficulty past 11. Now you've got Nioh. Sound interesting to you? It definitely piqued my interest. Let's see if the execution holds up. With that being said, hey, I'm Ray, and this is Obsession, a series where we look at if a game truly is worthy of taking over our lives. And today, we're looking at Nioh. Before we dive into Nioh, I want to quickly go over what it means to be obsession-worthy and the criteria I look at in determining this quality. An obsession-worthy game is a game that begs to be played for hundreds of hours over dozens of playthroughs, even planning to start your next playthrough the second your current one ends. In addition, it's a game that keeps you thinking about it even when you aren't playing, whether it's theory crafting build ideas, strategies, or planning out your next route through the game. For me, the biggest contributors to this are the following criteria: having fun and unique mechanics, meaningful build variety, uniqueness of each playthrough, and ease of replay. If a game excels in these 4 areas, then it's likely to be worthy of obsessing over. I test this by playing through enough of the game to get a good grasp of the mechanics and test the build systems. Then I restart and do a normal playthrough. This way, I experience the whole game while testing a few builds and how easy it is to replay. On to the discussion. Nioh was developed by Team Ninja of Ninja Gaiden fame and published by Koei Tecmo. It was released in 2017. The game is often referred to as falling into the Souls-like genre, though while there is a good amount of influence that Dark Souls had on the game, it really carves its own path in being a brutally difficult hack-and-slash ARPG. Nioh is set in an alternate history Japan where yokai and spirits abound. The story sees you, an Englishman named William Adams, setting out to Japan to save your guardian spirit from Edward Kelly, a sorcerer who plans to use his power to sway the power struggle of Japan's warring clans. After the tutorial, set in England, you make your way through Japan, meeting a cast of spirits and historical Japanese figures, getting involved in the politics of the world while tracking down Kelly to rescue your guardian spirit. While the premise sounds straightforward enough, the execution of the story seems to be a bit hit or miss for players, with it landing in the miss category for me. But to be fair, I've always personally fallen into the camp that a game's story only has to be serviceable enough to justify fun gameplay, and Nioh has fun gameplay. This isn't a universal stance, and I know many don't think this way, but if you do, Nioh's story is present enough to matter while being big enough in the background that it doesn't detract from the true draw of the game, deep combat. And the combat is definitely where the game shines. I'll get more into that in unique mechanics. Nioh is a mission-based game that can see the player blasting through the 15 or so main missions, or having the player take their time and complete a plethora of side missions that help both fill in the world and the central conflict, as well as help pace player progression with the difficulty curve of the game. Main story missions often see William progressing through a map, clearing out enemies, searching, dealing with a map's main gimmick, then fighting a powerful boss at the end of the stage. When I say that each mission's map has its own gimmick, this may sound like a knock on the game. However, I think the gimmicks are implemented well and add to the unique identity of each map. For instance, one early level sees you in a mine filled with poisonous gas. William can temporarily clear a room of gas through using a large vacuum-like machine, then going into the area to clear out strange rocks that were producing the poison in the first place. These tie well into the boss of the area, which is a centipede demon constructed of these poisonous rocks. A later mission has the player scouring a rundown dock, lighting beacons of flame before fighting the boss of the level. These torches are in no way required to be lit in order to fight the boss, though lighting them eliminates enemy mobs from the boss arena. The torches can also be utilized during the fight to set your weapon on fire in order to deal extra damage to the boss. Another level has large pillars of ice blocking your path. The level sees you tracking down ice butterflies that are the source of these pillars and clearing out the butterflies in order to clear the blockage and move forward in the level. Again, these butterflies directly relate to the boss of the mission, giving it its own unique identity. These are just 3 relatively early examples of the kinds of gimmicks found throughout the game. They add a lot of character to the levels, and make navigating through the level to get to the boss feel more like part of the event, rather than feeling like a meaningless roadblock to slow down an otherwise fun boss rush. Side missions often see you trying to find an object on a map, killing a certain enemy, or clearing a portion of the map. These are often quicker objectives to accomplish than the main missions, though these side missions unlock a great deal of content for the player, ranging from new spirit guardians to upgrades for the blacksmith. This leads into what goes on in the game between missions. Between missions, you are taken to a map screen where you can decide what missions to take on next, as well as go to your home base of sorts. At this base, you have access to a store, a blacksmith, a dojo for training missions, which unlock access to different skills, and a shrine, which can also be accessed during missions as Nioh's answer to bonfires. At the shrine, you can level up utilizing Amrita to increase one of 8 stats: body, heart, stamina, strength, skill, dexterity, magic, and spirit. Now onto unique mechanics. I want to start off by covering the combat of Nioh. While obviously combat in and of itself is not unique to Nioh by any stretch of the imagination, Nioh handles combat and its intricacies in a very unique manner. At its core, Nioh combat will be familiar to anybody who has played Dark Souls. You have your health, you're given medicine that can restore your health, but gets consumed when you use it. The medicine, however, replenishes a certain amount when resting at shrines, similar to Estus flasks. You can also find more medicine as loot from enemies, increasing the amount you can hold past what is replenished upon death, similar to blood vials in Bloodborne. This balance of replenishment with a recoverable loot source is really nice and rewards conservation of healing items while not punishing those who need to use them. I'm sure many of us can remember taking on something like the Orphan of Kos for the first time, or really any boss in Bloodborne, and running out of blood vials, having to pause the fight, go grind more, and try the fight again just to lose them. Thankfully, the replenishment aspect eliminates that need. But, of course, picking up more can make a fight a little bit easier. Next, we have Nioh's version of stamina, Ki. Ki is used up with any action you take, from dodging and attacking to sprinting. It regenerates over time if you hold off on doing any ki-consuming actions. This, however, is an area where Nioh begins to innovate. In addition to passively waiting for your ki to fill up before acting again, you have access to what is called a ki pulse, which instantly refills a portion of your ki, allowing for a much more active and aggressive playstyle. Whenever you use your ki, you see a faint bar that is left behind. Once you stop acting for a short time, this bar fills up quickly with white before disappearing. If the player hits a button to activate a ki pulse while the bar is white, however, you will regain your ki, as well as disperse yokai fields along with other benefits to your player as you progress. When it comes to offense, the player has a few options. You are given 2 melee slots and 2 range slots. I'll quickly cover ranged mechanics first, since they are much less robust. All weapons can aim and fire one of 2 ammo types from a weapon category. For instance, bows can fire both arrows and fire arrows. When it comes to melee combat, this is where the depth really comes in. You are given access to light and heavy attacks. These can be used in combination with each other as well. However, in addition to attack variations, you also have stances in Nioh, which add a whole new layer to the combat. There are 3 stances: low, mid, and high. Low stance has attacks that are often less range and deal less damage while focusing on speed. High stance has much slower attacks that rely on heavy force and high damage. Mid stance, as you could guess, is a balance between the two. You can change stances at any time during combat, with some weapons even having their skills revolve around combos that flow from one stance to the next, such as the Odachi. This was definitely my preferred weapon. This leads into another aspect of Nioh that separates it from just being another Souls-like, and leans into the RPG aspects of a RPG genre. Skills. Throughout the game, you unlock samurai points, which can be used to unlock weapon skills. These skills can be passive effects for a weapon, such as increasing damage after a successful key pulse, but more often than not, unlock unique moves for each weapon class. These moves can be executed through using a certain attack at the end of each combo, or by pressing multiple button inputs, such as block and heavy attack. In addition to weapons and weapon skills, you have another unique aspect of melee combat: living weapons. I mentioned earlier that William takes aid from a number of spirit guardians throughout the game. These guardians apply different passives to William, with stronger passives being unlocked with higher spirit levels. Guardian spirits can also take a more active role in your build through their living weapon ability. This is the ability to temporarily infuse your weapon with the power of your guardian spirit, changing your moveset, increasing damage, adding elemental affinity, and temporarily making William immune to incoming damage. The living weapon system is incredibly flashy, and often is a major key to successfully surviving a boss encounter or dying to them. While I've only really covered what makes Nioh's combat unique, Nioh's combat is really one of the major points that makes this game stand out as unique to me. The other biggest selling point for its unique identity is the Diablo-style loot system. I mentioned a little earlier that weapon skills are what set each weapon class apart. That's because each weapon within a class plays identically to one another. Instead of having slightly different movesets, Nioh kept weapons identical while having randomized damage and passives added to the weapon that scales with the weapon's level. You can also find weapons of differing rarity, from common, rare, legendary, and so on. These determine the amount of potentially powerful buffs that you can receive from your weapon. The same applies to armor, but with defense instead of damage, obviously. Once you find a good weapon and begin using it, your familiarity with that weapon increases. Weapons you are familiar with can be leveled up at the blacksmith, though this comes at an ever-increasing cost. You can also use the blacksmith to re-roll skills on weapons and armor if you found something you like but didn't care for a particular buff that the equipment grants you. If you are somebody who gets a dopamine hit when you see a great roll on a weapon, this system is for you. However, if you're somebody who hates inventory management and reading through tons of stat blocks, this system can honestly be a bit cumbersome. But it really comes down to preference whether you like the loot system or not. I really enjoyed getting to see all the different stat blocks that you unlocked. Of course, this breaks up the core gameplay loop of combat. However, I also like to think that it adds to the loop. Combat, pause, look at your menu. Combat, pause, look at your menu. Again, this could be a detraction for some, but it was a positive for me. So when it comes to unique mechanics, Nioh has quite a bit that separates it from other ARPGs and Souls-likes. Most of these mechanics revolve around combat, which in my opinion is great, since on a 10th playthrough of a game, it's really the core loop of combat that will keep you coming back for more. Starting off with meaningful build variety, I want to acknowledge that the loot system in the game, having randomized stats and buffs, can increase variety. Certain playstyles may develop around a certain piece of armor or weapon that reward that playstyle. However, the effect on variety varies greatly depending on the usefulness of the skill. Due to that variance, I'm not going to spend much time talking in depth about the random aspects of builds, and instead will focus on what the player actually has control over through each and every playthrough. I wanted to acknowledge that up front because, again, the randomness factor can be a huge draw for some, while being a deterrent for others. So when it comes to what is in the player's control, Nioh is not necessarily a top contender in build variety compared to some games, but still does a really good job. Earlier I briefly mentioned stats, and failed to mention that weapons scale with stats. This is probably obvious to some of you. I also mentioned that skills contribute to weapon identities, and I also mentioned that every player has 2 weapon slots. I didn't, however, talk about how all these things can play together. While there are some obvious combinations of weapons that play off similar stats, for instance using an Odachi in one slot and a hammer in the second, or dual swords and tonfas, this isn't necessary to do. If the player opts for a more balanced approach to stat allocation, They can wield something like one heavy hitting weapon and a quick weapon for elemental damage and stun locking. I also want to mention that in addition to weapons, the player has access to ninjutsu and onmyo magic, which I'm going to refer to as magic moving forward because I don't know if I'm saying that first word correctly. While they are optional aspects of the game that you can engage with or not, they bring a nice sense of optimization and variety to the table. Ninjutsu are broken down into a couple of categories, which I'm going to refer to as passives and actives. Passives are what they sound like: a percentage boost to bows, holding more bullets, decreasing ki usage on dodges, and so on. Meanwhile, actives are often some sort of classic ninja tool, ranging from shuriken and kunai, and traps and status ailment appliers. These are tools that replenish on resting at a shrine, allowing for liberal usage of strong and impactful items. Likewise, on the magic side, the player has passives and actives. Passives are similar, though focused on the more spiritual aspects of the game rather than the physical. Actives can range from casting the equivalent of Fireball to buffing the player and their weapons, or debuffing enemies' speed, defense, offense, and so on. Adding these passives and actives into your build can really help expand the variety that Nioh offers quite a bit. Moving back to armor and equipment, in addition to randomized skills that can be found, some armors also provide static set bonuses. Set bonuses are what they sound like. You get an additional bonus for wearing a certain number of pieces from the same set of armor, with more pieces providing a higher benefit. And, while on benefits, I wanted to bring up the Spirit Guardians and their effect on meaningful build variety. While I mentioned earlier that Guardians provide passives to the player, I didn't get into how impactful some of these passives can be. While some passives can provide higher elemental damage that matches the spirit's elemental affinity, or augments the user's defense, some passives can increase the potency of ninjutsu or magic abilities, increase William's health by a substantial amount, add a healing effect to the player when they perform certain moves. Adding all of these together, as well as having 2 accessory slots that act as additional passive slots for the player, Nioh's build variety is quite good. Like I said, there are definitely some games that outshine Nioh, but I think that what Nioh provides is more than enough to keep you coming back for more. How good of a job does Nioh do at making each playthrough feel unique? Meh. The build variety can definitely affect the feel of each playthrough being unique from the last, but that's about all Nioh has going for it. While I understand that saying something like Dark Souls can make a playthrough feel unique, while Nioh doesn't do as well may sound hypocritical, hopefully I can explain where I'm coming from. In Dark Souls, you make your character. You can roleplay through your run. You can approach challenges in a variety of ways. Fight bosses in an order that works best for you, or in which you stumble upon them, and there are usually a few endings to go for. In Nioh, you are William Adams. You may have a different weapon in your hand, but you progress through the same way every time, fighting the same bosses in the same order, with no variation at the end. Once you've experienced Nioh, there isn't much to experience beyond trying a new build or doing New Game Plus to raise the difficulty. Is this an issue for a game that puts its focus on tight and engaging combat above pretty much everything else? Not really. If you want to replay Nioh, it's probably because you love the gameplay. I can't see too many people wanting to relive the story or being left with a feeling that there was more to experience, and that's fine. So when it comes to ease of replay, how does Nioh do? Well, similar to Armored Core 6, this really depends on your view of mission-based games. Nioh has an introductory mission that, while it throws you into the gameplay pretty fast, does come off as a bit of a stumbling block on subsequent playthroughs. While the gameplay in the intro area is fun and relatively easy, it doesn't count in any way towards character progression. You don't get to keep any equipment you find, you don't gain Amrita through the mission, you can't even interact with stance changing your weapon throughout the mission. While I think that this works great for a first playthrough, slowly introducing the player to mechanics that separate Nioh from Dark Souls, it felt a little bit cumbersome on the second go. That being said, once you get past this mission, cutscenes and dialogue are easily skipped, allowing you to focus down the rest of the game. Something that I noticed is that the game scales in difficulty very quickly when you stick to the main missions only. For a first playthrough, I would recommend taking advantage of all the side missions just to pace the game's difficulty a little bit better. However, as your skill as a player increases, you may not have to pace the level scaling of the game as much, allowing you to slowly phase out the need for leveling through side missions, streamlining replays as you progress in skill. Nioh also has a New Game Plus system that not only increases the difficulty of the game, but also increases the possible item rarity that you can find in that playthrough. Obviously, utilizing New Game Plus will also cut back on the need for side content to progress your level, as you keep your level in subsequent playthroughs. So while the introductory mission can hurt when starting over, the rest of the game makes up for it by allowing the player to progress as quickly as they need to, or at least want to, and incentivizing the use of New Game Plus. Before we get into my thoughts on whether Nioh is worthy of obsessing over or not, it's important to first answer the simple question, is it fun? But before we even get into that, I just want to say that if you've made it this far in the video, I must be doing something right. So why not subscribe and see what else I have in store when it comes to helping you find your next gaming obsession. Anyway, is Nioh fun? While I have a ton of respect for Nioh, for me, the answer is actually no. I didn't enjoy myself with this one. On paper, Nioh is a fantastic game. The combat is deep and engaging. I happen to like the loot system. Build variety was fun to play with. The level design is great. So what's the issue? For me, at least where I am right now, Nioh is asking a little too much of the player. Obviously, I like games that challenge the player. Dark Souls would not get the love that it does if it were a super simple and easy game. I love doing Iron Man runs of tactical games set to higher difficulties, but I found Nioh's challenge a little bit too much for me to enjoy right now. Don't get me wrong, it's not impossible by any means, and I think that if you love challenge for the sake of challenge, Nioh will be great for you, but for me, I found myself not wanting to even finish the game. I think that if you put this game in front of me a few years ago and said, have at it, I would have been frustrated, but overall had a really good time. However, as a side effect of having this channel and pushing myself to play more games quicker so that I can make more videos and stay on a schedule, a challenge that I would have enjoyed even a few months ago felt like bashing my head into a wall. Sure, I could have eventually knocked down the wall, but instead of feeling a sense of accomplishment, at this point in my life, I would have just been left with a concussion. And considering I've actually sustained a few of those in the past, I'll pass. I hope that it's obvious that I respect this game a great deal. It is a fantastic game and mechanically sound. However, its difficulty being as high as it is, you have to be in the right headspace for the game to click. And with everything going on in my life and trying to balance making videos, that's just not where I was when I played this. So, with all that being said, is Nioh truly worthy of obsessing over? For someone who loves both challenge and in-depth gameplay, yes. However, if you're someone who doesn't absolutely love a hardcore challenge, or maybe you're in a spot in life where you don't need your hobbies to add even more stress to your life, maybe hold off on this one until you're ready for it. Like I said, it truly is a fantastic game, and I've heard that Nioh 2 is even better. I have high hopes for those who love this series that Nioh 3 will be another great addition to the series. Did I enjoy myself this time? No. But am I glad that I played this? Yes. Am I glad to be able to share it with you in a video? Yes. Because you see, I've mentioned this before, but I don't want to make reviews of these games as much as I want to share what can make this special for the right player. These are more overviews and discussions than real reviews. I want to be able to recognize when a game would appeal to a certain player, even if that player isn't me. Likewise, I want to acknowledge that just because I love a game, that doesn't make it a great game. I believe that there's no such thing as a perfect game for everybody, but that everybody can find their perfect game. And that's what I hope to do, help you find your perfect game. So, there you have it, my thoughts on Nioh. A great game that just isn't for me. At least not where I'm at in life right now. If you've played Nioh before, let me know your experience. If you haven't played it, has this video convinced you to give it a try, or maybe rethink giving it a go? Let me know in the comments. But regardless, I hope to see you again soon, and until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope that you know that you truly matter in this world. Take care.